Entrando em contato com o atendimento ao cliente... Para muitas pessoas é um jeito fácil de arruinar um bom dia. Mas na Zendesk, nós deixamos a experiência do cliente melhor. Melhor para sua avó, melhor para o seu vendedor preferido de flores, melhor para o cara do apartamento 3A, melhor para você, melhor para todos. Porque enquanto alguns dizem que o cliente sempre tem razão, nós dizemos que o cliente é sempre humano. E, como seres humanos, queremos fazer algo melhor para todos nós. Zendesk, experiência do cliente com IA desenvolvida para humanos.
Você que está ouvindo esse podcast e vive no trânsito entre uma reunião e outra, só um carro poderá te dar a segurança que precisa. O Volkswagen Taos. O SUVW com nota máxima em segurança e com sensor de ponto cego, assistente de faixa e muitos outros poderes. Taos, um carro com superpoderes.
Hello and welcome to The Price of Music, the show that looks at the money behind the music industry with me, Steve Lamack, and Music Allies Head of Insight, Stuart Dredge. Stuart, before we get into this week's general music industry money matters, given the events of last Thursday, what are you picking up from your contacts about a change in government and what it might mean for the financial prosperity of the music industry and music makers in general now that Labour have come to power? Do you think there'll be many changes in policy relating to the industry at all?
Well, yeah. I mean, everyone who's been talking about it has now recovered from staying up all night. So that's one thing. The music industry is less tired than they were on Friday morning from watching it all. Yeah. So I did this before the election. I looked at all the manifestos, and I want to say I read them all, but I didn't. I just basically did a find the word music and see what they said. So it's a way of reading the manifestos. It's very focused. And none of them said that much, but Labour did make one firm promise that it's going to crack down on ticket touting and it's going to have more regulations for secondary ticketing, the likes of Viagogo. So it's promised that, and that's one of the first things it's going to do. There was some stuff about music education in schools, a lot more on that. So they're going to try and have more access to kind of creative subjects in schools. They're going to have a new network to help parents find lessons. But then it was kind of just general flannel about they've got a creative industry sector plan to accelerate growth and create good jobs in music, film and gaming, but no hard specifics. So we're going to have to wait and see what they do. Yeah. But yeah, they're promising. Everyone comes in and goes, we're going to support the music industry and the creative sector, but the devil will be in the detail and how what kind of measures they do.
Yeah, and who's going to be in charge of doing it as well? Because Thangham Debonair, who was the Shadow Culture Secretary and predicted to be the Culture Secretary in government, and who was very well liked and respected by people working certainly in live music, I know, who'd had some very positive exchanges with her. Thangham lost her seat in Bristol, so instead Lisa Nandy will be Culture Secretary, although from what I've learned from talking to lobbyists over the last 6 months, I'm simply expecting a very long queue of people from the creative arts forming a line at her door, all to state their case. So we'll, as you say, we shall see. But I imagine in the first 100 days there'll be lots of conversations about, all sorts of things around music, because we still hanging over us. We still have the fallout, I guess you could say, from the streaming inquiry, which really didn't go as far as obviously musicians wanted, and also the CMS committee on grassroots venues and what pickup Labour may take from that, the findings of that committee. So there's quite a bit, but it will take them a while, I imagine, before they can get up to speed with everything.
And the other thing is that Tom Gray didn't win the seat he was competing in, which kind of means he's not going to be an MP. So he may be freed up to kind of return to his campaigning on streaming and artist rights. So in a strange way, him not being in the House of Parliament might actually see him doing more to kind of press the government to do stuff in response to the streaming inquiry, certainly. So we could see some more kind of debate and discussion around that coming from his side.
Yeah. First in the news, well, this is breaking news. We're recording this on Tuesday lunchtime, and a really interesting press release, a slightly sad press release, has just arrived in your inbox, Stuart.
Yes, it has. It's from Universal Music Group. So it's it's breaking today about 12:30, but by the time this goes out, it'll be news. And yeah, it's Universal Music talking about their reorganization, which has kind of been tipped earlier in the year, and some stuff has happened in the US. And yeah, so this press release, I'm sort of going through it now, kind of going through all the kind of the bits. There's going to be some change in the labels. So Island and EMI are merging as a new Island EMI label group. So that's two very famous labels coming together. There's a new Polydor label group, which is going to include Polydor, Capital, and 0207 Def Jam. So kind of these two big frontline labels now. That's the reorganization there. They're having a big new audience and media division, which is kind of the thing that serves all the artists and labels and handles things like analytics and marketing and so on. But then near the end of it, this is an email to staff from David Joseph, the boss, says, the vast majority of our team will continue to be a part of our business going forward. Some roles are impacted by the proposed structural changes, and it saddens me we'll have to part ways with some incredible colleagues. So it doesn't say a number, it doesn't say how many people. I believe it's all being kind of communicated at the moment. But there's some layoffs, there's a restructure, and this is part of wider changes going on at Universal Music Group. So that's
it's always sad when you lose people out of the music industry, I think. But that's quite a bombshell, isn't it? That they would consider merging Island, which has such a legacy and such a name. I mean, it's I hate using the word brand, but Island Records is, very well known for being Island Records. To merge that with EMI, that's quite a major step. I wonder what the reasoning is behind that.
Yeah, and they're keeping both brands in the name, Island EMI label group. But, you wonder kind of how that goes over time. Does people just end up shortening it to Island? But yeah, and this email, and it's like a lot of these emails often are. It's very much about the positive. These are great changes. These are going to fuel our growth. We're kind of getting ready for the challenges to come. So it's very much presented positively. But yeah, I would think by tomorrow perhaps there might be more details on how many people are affected and what it means. But it's but it's a wider. I think Warner Music have laid off people recently. Like, this is across all the major labels. There is this sense of they're restructuring. They're looking ahead, saying, what do we need to do? How do we need to be organized? So for Universal, it's about that. Like, how do we bring people together into these bigger groups and these bigger label teams? And
I guess that's it, isn't it? I mean, you do worry about the identity of labels, though. When when labels are merged and people start sharing jobs, but maybe it's some of the backline jobs which you can do for two labels at a time, or whether they're just trying to find a way of being more collaborative within the group. But you do still want those labels to have their own vision, I think, particularly to say Island Records. Island have done so well recently by spotting, a certain re-emergence in some areas of guitar music, having signed Yard Act and English Teacher and all sorts of things. The Lathams, they've had a couple of number one albums with. So, that'll be interesting to watch and to see who will be heading up those labels as well, because the staffing at the top will be very important, I think. Here's another big story which was reported everywhere earlier on in the week, but still, I think worth mentioning. This even made the red tops. Fresh from headlining Glastonbury Festival, Coldplay have settled their dispute with their ex-manager, Dave Holmes. Remind us what the issue was here before we get to the conclusion.
Yeah, well, so this is kind of the overwhelming good vibes of their Glastonbury set, and it's all about the kind of the togetherness and that. And then they've had this dispute going on for a while. So yeah, Dave Holmes, he was their manager. He sued them in August last year for £10 million in unpaid commission. So he said, we have a contract, I've been sacked, you owe me this money. And they countersued. They said he allowed their tour costs to spiral out of control and demanded 14 million quid in damages. So there was a kind of a lawsuit and a counter lawsuit. Now they've settled. I think the official thing is the details are confidential. Each side is paying their own costs. The Sun said Coldplay are going to pay Holmes a 7-figure sum as part of the settlement, but that's just that report, like you said in the red tops. And it's all settled. But it was probably one of the most prominent disputes, I think, isn't it, between an artist and their manager? We've seen kind of lawsuits before and kind of fallings out, but this was one of the ones where the band is still going and they're still big and they're, this was all to do with their current tour and the cost. And even when it's like, there was even stuff about, pylons and screens. It went into the details of what had been spent and whether it was working.
Yeah,
So it was
that's right.
very
Well, I think their claim was that because they counter. So yeah, you're right. They countersued for £14 million, alleging amongst other things that Holmes had overspent on their current tour, their Music of the Spheres World Tour, had overspent by £17.5 million, including £9.7 million allegedly for a visual project known as Jet Screen that they only used in 10 of their gigs. Out of, I think they've played 165 shows on this tour, but apparently it was reportedly the screen was too big to use at most of those gigs, so it only got rolled out 10 times. That was part of their claim. There was also the other matter, wasn't it? And I saw this while researching this story online. It came up that court papers seen by the Times claimed that, well, the band claimed that. This is, do you remember the loans? They claim that, to the best of our knowledge, Mr. Holmes used monies obtained by the loan agreements to fund a property development venture in or around Vancouver. This was 2 loans which he negotiated at an interest rate of just 2.72%. He negotiated the loans with Live Nation, who obviously promote Coldplay. So Coldplay was saying, how can he negotiate on our behalf while also being in business with Live Nation, essentially, or having taken out a loan with Live Nation? So there was all this going on. It was there was a lot to it, and a lot we shall never know, including what that 7-figure sum actually is. It's an interesting story, as you say. It's not uncommon for managers and artists to fall out at some stage in their career. But Holmes was, he'd been their manager since 2005, right up to 2022 when the contract ran out. I remember being slightly surprised when he took over. I can't remember who he was managing at the time. I think Interpol, and he's managed Scissor Sisters and people. But I guess it was because maybe they wanted to try and increase their profile in the States, or just, I guess, they wanted to build their career in the States from the base which they'd achieved, the foundation of success which they had at that point, and maybe getting an American manager was one way to do it. But yeah, it's a long time to be managed by one person who, he comes out. There's there's parts of that documentary film they made, the Coldplay documentary film, where Holmes is seen as being a very important part of their story. So this falling out was quite a big deal, and as you say, it's a bit fractious, isn't it? But by the end, anyway, Coldplay are paying out to their former manager. Next to, news from Canada next, and you might think, Canada? A Canadian music industry story? What's that got to do with the price of fish? What's in it for us? But this is almost something of a test case, this, isn't it? It's the story of, which we reported on a couple of weeks ago, of Canada's government imposing a streaming tax on the likes of Amazon, Apple and Spotify, who are now all fighting back.
That's right, yeah. So it's a new law there where global streaming services, which is music and video as well, will contribute 5% of their revenues from Canada into a new fund, and that will be then used to support local music and artists and news and TV and film and culture generally. And yeah, I think when we originally reported it, the streaming services representative body protested and said this is a terrible idea. But yeah, now Apple, Amazon and Spotify want to go to court and have filed a legal challenge. And so is the Motion Picture Association from the video side of things as well. So it's kind of under attack from both sides. And yeah, I think we sort of talked about this before, but so I don't hope I'm not repeating myself, but it's essentially about the streaming services saying we do a lot for local artists already. We promote them, we give them playlist space, we help them find a global audience, we give them tools to kind of measure their audience. Like, we're already supporting local culture and you don't need to make us do it. But in Canada, the argument is that the government saying, actually, we'd rather you contribute to a fund and then we decide how that's used and we decide how to support local artists. So it's kind of a battle over who decides what and how to support local culture from these big. And there's also Spice in Canada. I think they accused this new law of being just a way to kind of prop up traditional radio. So they see it as a way to kind of funnel money towards the traditional radio and broadcasters because streaming is taking over. So there's a bit of that needle going on between the industries of radio and streaming. But yeah, and to go back to your point about this not being just a Canadian story, this similar things happening in France, where streaming services are being ordered to contribute to an initiative that kind of supports local French music. Other parts of the world are thinking about this too. I think it's going to become a growing conversation in countries that feel like their local industry needs more support, and these big services who are making money should be contributing. And again, it is that thing of who's best placed to decide how that should work. Is it those streaming services self-regulating that, or is it the government or the fund that it creates? So we've not seen anything like it here so far, because I think UK music, we feel like it's doing well globally, but you can imagine it in a lot of countries, they might be tempted to kind of go down a similar route. So I think that's why the streaming services are fighting back hard in Canada, because they want to make it clear that they don't think this is a good idea anywhere.
Okay, for this next story, now don't worry if you're new to the players in this, because Stuart will explain who everyone is along the way. Merck Mercuriadis is stepping down from Hypnosis. So you better just remind us who Merck is and what Hypnosis does.
Yeah, well, Merck is a music industry veteran. Used to run Sanctuary Records back in the day. He's been in the music industry for a long, long time. There's actually about 46 companies called Hypnosis. No, it's not quite about. There's several companies called Hypnosis. So the two that are relevant here are Hypnosis Songs Fund, which is a company that's bought loads of music catalogs from famous songwriters in recent years, and then Hypnosis Song Management, which is the company that advised Hypnosis Songs Fund on what to buy and how to manage it. Merck Mercuriadis has founded both of them. And at the moment, we've covered this story a lot. Blackstone, a big investment company, is buying Hypnosis Songs Fund. That's the catalogue buyer. And it has said it's going to keep on Hypnosis Song Management as the advisor. So it's going to keep on this other Hypnosis telling it what to do. And so what's happened now is Merck has said he's going to step down from the latter company, but only when that acquisition closes, not before. And the spice in that is there's a meeting of shareholders this month of Hypnosis Songs Fund to approve that acquisition. And there has been some rumors that some of them are cutting up a bit, like, actually, we think they should pay a bit more. So that vote to approve this deal is maybe not as certain as it might seem. And so this is the latest development. Merck has said he gave an interesting statement, actually, because he said this is the right time to step away. But he also said he wants to spend more time advocating on behalf of songwriters to ensure they're properly compensated for their work. And he mentioned he'd always had an idea of bringing songwriters together globally and organized. So I kind of wonder if he's stepping down and that might smooth the path to this acquisition and settle all that. But it sounds like he's got something up his sleeve next, which might involve campaigning for songwriters' rights. And that could be quite interesting, because he's always been quite a loud voice in support of songwriters. Like in all the streaming economy debates we had in the UK, he was always talking about songwriters needed a bigger slice of the pie from streaming. So he's always been quite opinionated. But it sounds like maybe now he's going to have more time on his hands, he might be focusing even more on that, and that could be interesting.
He's someone else who started out as a manager as well, wasn't he? He managed.
Oh yes,
yeah, he managed. What were they called? Catherine Wheel. I think he managed the band Catherine Wheel, who were a sort of shoegaze era British band from East Anglia. I think that's where it all started. That's Merck. Now, what should we do next? Oh, AI. Here's the AI story of the week.
Yeah.
And this is our friends, the startup Suno, the controversial AI music startup, which has now released a mobile app. And there's a couple of interesting angles here. You were telling us the other day, Stuart. What's important about this story?
Yeah, so Suno, like you say, it's one of the controversial. So it launched last year as a way to make AI music. It raised $125 million in funding, so it's the best funded AI music company in the world. But it's also one of the two that are currently being sued by record labels, and we reported on that story in the US. So it's been accused of not licensing the music that it's trained its model on. So last week it launched an iPhone app, which is only in the US for now, so we can't get it here. And it lets you create songs, and you can record sounds with your phone to use in songs, and you can listen to music made by other people. And there was a stat alongside that announcement that 12 million people have used Suno since its launch last year, which I was crunching some numbers. So for perspective, there are around Spotify famously said there are around 225,000 professional and aspiring artists in the world. Like that's based on the number of musicians who are making a living or trying to make a living. And so 53 times that number of people have already used this one AI music service in less than a year since it launched, which kind of gives you a sense of the scale of this stuff. And that's before it was out on phones, which is the route to the mainstream. Like people obviously still use websites, but when you have a mobile app, that is kind of what's been seen as the path to the mainstream for this technology.
Can I just ask a question? For this mobile app, do you have to? Is it a subscription service, and do you know how much it costs? I mean, are they making money out of this mobile app, the mobile version of what they do?
Well, yeah, actually, on the website as well, it's free to use, and you get a certain amount of credits. And the way this works is you get credits, and when every time you make a song, you spend a credit, and when you run out of credits, that's when you have to pay.
Okay.
So on the App Store, it's free to use, but then you can subscribe, and there's a Pro plan and a Premier plan. The Pro plan costs $10 a month, and the Premier plan costs $8, and you get more credits, more features. And so in theory, it's making money. We don't know how many people are subscribing, so we don't know how much. But what I thought was interesting is that it's using Apple's in-app purchases system on the App Store for this. So if you subscribe to Suno within the app, Apple's going to get 30% of that payment for the first year, and then it drops to 15% after a year if you subscribe. So the spicy angle here is that labels are suing a startup that Apple is now potentially making money from. So I wonder if labels are maybe going to have a few thoughts to share with Apple on that while the kind of case continues, because Apple has generally stayed out of the fray when it comes to AI and music and the debates about copyright. But now it could be making a bit of money from one of the ones that's controversial. So Apple hasn't commented, and it's just me wondering if that's a point of tension. But it'll be interesting to see what happens next with that.
While we're on the subject of where technology meets pop music, Beyonce has released some virtual merchandise in Snapchat. I just say that again, virtual merchandise. I mean, most of these stories this week are designed to make me sound like a grumpy old man, but virtual merchandise, Stuart.
Okay, I'm going to do my thing where I tell you it's all reasonable and you hopefully end up agreeing with me, but we'll see. But do you know, actually, the start of this story is she dropped some new physical merchandise. So that's where it begins. So she dropped, you can get a denim cowboy hat, which is something that's always been missing from my wardrobe. So, I'm quite pleased with that. She had an ashtray, which
really?
I want to pause on. In 2024, a popular artist releasing an ashtray as merchandise. That seems a bit on the nose to me, but it's a Hold'em ashtray. So based around the track on a recent album. So physical merchandise, loads of them sold out straight away, as Beyonce's merch does, because she's so big. But in Snapchat now, you can get some of the clothes, not the ashtray, but you can get the kind of the hats and the clothes. So I'll zoom out and explain this, because in Snapchat, which is one of the big social apps, they've got their own thing called Bitmoji, which is like virtual characters. So you, as a Snapchat user, can create your Bitmoji, which generally looks like you. It's a cartoon version of yourself. And then you can send messages with it, and you can post videos with it. And it's kind of your form of self-expression, saying, so I could send you a message with my Bitmoji saying hi or making a sad face or whatever. It's a bit like, it's kind of their version of the kind of the thing that Apple has, where you can send a picture of your own face in cartoon form. So you can get the Beyonce merch for free here. So I think I sent you this. I've got my Snapchat Bitmoji as a 46-year-old man. And I've got a Cowboy Carter hat, and I've got like this kind of Miss World style sash saying Cowboy Carter as well. So I'm fully Beyonce branded up. So the weirdness, I want to do it. So like when I was 18, going back a long time, I lived in band t-shirts. Like I was at university in Norwich, and I had my Sleeper t-shirt, which had like the Kellogg's logo, but Sleeper. I loved that. Do you remember that? Do you ever see that powder t-shirt that was like the Star Trek shirt?
No, I don't think I did. I think I've still got that Sleeper t-shirt upstairs in my collection of t-shirts. Yeah, absolutely. I've got hundreds of t-shirts upstairs. But yeah, I remember that Sleeper t-shirt. Yeah.
So I lived in those things, and it was me. It was like, so when I went out to the spaces I was in, and for me that was like Peppermint Park and the waterfront in Norwich. So the kind of the indie clubs. It was me sort of expressing who I loved and who I was, and it's, you know, it was what we all did. And so I guess virtual merch is just the same now in the online spaces that younger people are hanging out in. So just as I would wear a sleeper t-shirt to kind of show off who I loved and meet other people who loved them too, that's what's happening in Snapchat, in Roblox, in all these kind of metaverse online spaces, social networks. And that's how I'd explain it, I think. It's like, so people are going to be getting this Beyonce merch, posting and messaging their characters wearing it. And for Beyonce, the benefit here is it's promotional. You know, it's reminding everyone that she's got an album out called Cowboy Carter. So it's that whole thing of expressing your fandom. It's just happening in digital spaces rather than physical. And that's how I explain it when someone is worried.
So in the various different formats, or Roblox, wherever, are you paying for this virtual merchandise? You are.
So in Snapchat, you're not. It's free. You just go to the link and you can get in Roblox. Yeah, it's being sold. And there've been some examples of artists making like more than $1 million from selling virtual T-shirts in Roblox and hats.
Yeah.
Because it's one of those things that, I mean, I look at how my kids play a game like Fortnite and the value they put on having the right outfit to show off. So yeah, and it's something the music industry is waking up to, that you can have your physical merch. And actually it makes sense if you design your virtual merch to look like your physical merch, because, you know, it's all about a good design, a nice t-shirt. And yeah, you're kind of maybe missing out if you're not exploring where your fans are. Like if you're a band whose fans aren't using Roblox or Snapchat, you know, there's maybe not so much point in this. But if you're a band with a young fan base, there's definitely money to be made and promotion to be had. Yeah. And that's what
virtual merchandise, or as we know it, in-app purchases. That's what it is, really. Here's a saner story, and this is about some. It's an interesting streaming state. I say interesting because you may have missed this. I had until Stuart pointed it out, but it does mark a really important moment in the story of the rise of the Afrobeats genre, because Rema, is that how you pronounce it? I always want to say Rema, but is it Rema?
I've heard Rema. I've heard Rema. I think Rema is safe.
Rema's Calm Down, the track Calm Down, has reached 2 billion Spotify streams, which is colossal. And as you were saying, it marks a real point, doesn't it? It's another watershed moment for Afrobeats.
It is, yeah. So he's one of the leading lights in Afrobeats. And Calm Down's an interesting story, I think, because it came out in February 2022 and it was pretty big. Beyond Nigeria, beyond Africa as well. But then in August that year, he released a remix with Selena Gomez on it, the American artist, and that's when it went stratospheric. And I think the two combined now have passed 2 billion streams on Spotify alone. But that's just over 1.4 billion streams for the remix and 600 million for the original. So it shows you how this remix really took it off. And there was an interesting phrase used. Actually, the last time it hit a milestone, there was a phrase, and it's like the biggest African artist-led track on Spotify. And the reason for that very specific phrasing is there was a track by Drake and Wizkid called One Dance back in the day, and that's done like 3.2 billion streams. But Wizkid was like the featured artist there, and Drake was the main artist. But here, Rema is the main artist, and Selena Gomez was the featured one. So, yeah, it's a big moment, I think. It's one. It's, in a way, it's not just one big moment. It's part of the trend, isn't it? Like Afrobeats really is. Just the streams are growing around the world. More artists are breaking through. Even at Glastonbury, we saw a bunch of Afrobeats artists on the Pyramid stage, like getting huge crowds. Like it's a real rising tide. And actually, bring it back to the first story today. Rema's label is Mavin, who we've talked about before, and Universal Music Group is buying a majority stake in his label on the back of their success.
Oh, really?
So. That success has got the world's biggest music company to say, actually, yeah, we want a piece of that. And that deal hasn't closed yet, but it's due to close soon. And so then he will be indirectly signed to Universal Music. So it's part of their growth.
Right. Careful what you wish for, though. Everybody, they'll merge you with 4 other labels within a month of you arriving. Well, actually, I think we've got just about enough time to do this. On the subject of streaming again, hip-hop artist Matt Corman has made more than $1 million from streaming, we learn, by releasing a new track every week. And this has been going on for several years now, hasn't it, I think? And the reason for mentioning this, I think it's just to show how different artists are working the system. to their advantage. But yeah, a new song. Take notes, John McClure, Reverend and the Makers, who is currently, what is he, nearly halfway through his promise to release a song a day every day during the year. Stick all of these up on Spotify. You can move house by the end of the year, John. But Matt's made $1 million.
Yeah, and he's getting, well, I mean, me not having heard of someone is no sign they're popular or not. But I hadn't heard of him until this press release came out from his company saying, yeah, he's made $1 million. It started as a COVID thing. So during the pandemic, he just decided to start releasing a song every Friday. And yeah, he's had more than 200 million streams. He says he's got 5 million monthly listeners. And it's all through his own label independently. He's basically been hustling since the pandemic. And one thing I thought was interesting, I looked at his Spotify profile and he's got 675,000 monthly listeners there. But he's got 5 million overall. And that's a little reminder to myself. Like, we talk about how many Spotify listens have you got, but that's only a portion of the total audience. And in his case, like more than 4 times the audience is elsewhere. So yeah, he's making money from his releases. He's got a vodka brand partnership. So brands are starting to get interested. And like you say, he's outside that traditional label system, but he's hustling and he's finding his way.
Yeah, because what intrigued me about this was how did he gain some traction in the first place? Because I mean, I could put a track a week up on Spotify till the end of time, and no one would listen. And so there must be some secret to how he managed to, at least get the ball rolling. Somebody must have said something, or he must have ended up on a playlist, or eventually, he became part of a beneficial algorithm.
Well, it sounds like he's the kind of guy who's working every route. And so, yeah, as an independent artist, you can submit songs to Spotify for playlist consideration. You can do all these things. So I assume he got the ball rolling. But yeah, the one thing about releasing a track every week is if they're good, and it falls down if they're terrible, or if you use up your ideas after half a year. But if they're good, it builds momentum. So every time you release a new track, I've seen some graphs in the past from people when you release new music, your baseline streams go up. So the more you can keep releasing music, if it's good, it will just take you up because people will hear that song, then they'll discover the other ones. It will get onto their algorithms. So if you've listened to a few of his songs now, when he has a new one on your release radar playlist on Spotify, it'll say he's got a new song this week. So yeah, it kind of, it does really depend on the music being good and people liking it. But if you can keep the creativity going and if you can build that momentum, it does start to sustain itself, I think, in that the people who, as you pick up more listens every week, they'll then be told when you have a new thing out. So yeah, he's working the system, but he's also, he's working hard. So it's like a good story about independent artists rather than anything, shady going on.
And you mentioned he's got a vodka brand, which brings us quite nicely to this final story of the episode. And this is a proper and finally story. And finally, the cheese brand Philadelphia has hired country musician Travis Yee to release a song all about the joys of cream cheese.
Cream cheese. We're going to say this phrase even more than any other phrase we've said, I think, in the next few minutes. Yeah, land of the cream cheese is a brand.
Oh man, I presume you've listened to it. I mean,
I've listened to little else this last week.
Oh man, it's absolutely as bad as you might imagine it could be. A country song about cream cheese.
Should I do some lyrics? I can do lyrics if you like.
I mean, I'd prefer it if you didn't, but the listeners at home might be interested.
We've got to educate, inform, and entertain, haven't we? So it's kind of the gist of the song is making a recipe, and he's like, so it's kind of a mixture of country patriotism with cream cheese brand evangelism. So it starts out with a dollop of freedom, a spoonful of grit, 1 ounce of pride with a dab of don't quit, a cup of compassion and a whole lot of liberty, and a big old block of that cream cheese. So and it's come out on streaming services. There's a music video. It's been promoted in ads, and it's being promoted in recipe duets on TikTok, which is another one of those phrases I'm going to throw at you. Recipe duets on TikTok, which apparently this is in the press release. There's more than 132 million cream cheese related recipes on TikTok alone. There's a lot of people out there making cream cheese related foodstuffs and putting on TikTok. But there's a serious point here, which I think he is in a different way forging his path like Matt Corman is. So This guy, Travis Yee, his TikTok handle is Asian country singer. So he's an Asian American country singer. So that already kind of makes him sort of standing out in this genre at a time when country music is diversifying. We're seeing more black country artists get momentum. But the weird thing is, Travis Yee has at the time of writing 2,675 Spotify listeners. That's his Spotify audience. That's very, very small.
Yeah.
The Land of Cream Cheese had 3, but on TikTok he's got 1 million followers. So he is very much a TikTok thing, not a streaming artist thing. And that's where this is basically an advertising campaign for Philadelphia. And what the importance of it is not how many streams a song gets on Spotify or Apple Music. The importance is it's going to be put as an ad on TikTok and social platforms. If you're someone who is interested in cooking, if you've shown an interest in cream cheese, which is one of the things the algorithms can detect, like if you've watched some of those videos on TikTok cream cheese, you're probably going to see this song. And it's going to be advertising. So really the value here is the advertisement. It's not about whether this song is popular or not. But he's getting paid for it. And he does other stuff that this might help him build his audience. So, he's found his path. And his path wasn't a track a week. His path was a song about cream cheese, which is where we are.
I wonder whether they would pay him. I wonder what the deal was. Do you think they paid him a lump sum? And that's it, or does it work like a record contract? Who do Philadelphia, the people who own Philadelphia, who commissioned this, would they get any royalties from it, or would they share the royalties? I don't know if it did. If there is money to be generated, say on TikTok, who gets the money? I don't know.
Well, exactly, and so they'll be spending money on making an ad. I'm just going to look it up actually because I want to look see who wrote the song. I assume it's his composition. Here we go. View credits. Written by someone called Emery Taylor, which might be his name. Who knows? One of the ones we've got pseudonym. But yeah, so it's those. There've been a lot. I did go to the big advertising show recently, so I'm maybe more on top of it than I would normally be. But do seem to be a lot of brands doing stuff with music, and these campaigns it's about a song, but it's also about it being promoted in ads. It's about social videos, about getting people to share it. So it does seem to be a growing thing. Yeah. What I wonder is, did he have a song about cream cheese and was just waiting for a brand to turn up? or did the brand come and say, please write a song about cream cheese, and he set to work? It'd be amazing if he's had this cream cheese song for 10 years and just never had a use for it until now. But,
that'll do it for this. Next week, by the way, Dolly Parton does Doritos. That's your lot for this episode. Thank you very much for listening. If you've enjoyed the show, and we hope you have, please do subscribe in your podcast app. And if you get a moment, give us a review and a rating, because honestly, every little helps in ways of getting the word out. You can also support the show by becoming a Price of Music fan or super fan for as little as £2 a month. Just go to patreon.com/thepriceofmusic to find out more. And if you have a question which you'd like answered on the show, email us at thepriceofmusicpodcast@gmail.com. On the next episode, talking to a man whose experience of the music industry over the years has provided him with some extreme highs and lows, which we'll be reliving while coming up with advice and tips for new artists along the way. Talking to singer, DJ, activist Tom Robinson will be our guest next time. Till then, thanks again. Cheerio.